Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the governor for asking me to join everyone up here on behalf of the educators in Christina School District. We look forward to being part of the conversation moving forward. Educators are an essential part in this conversation, and we have been talking to our members and plan on visiting all 5 schools to get a better outlook on what potentially can help us improve the city schools moving forward. At this point, I'd like to introduce the governor, Don Carney, who's also a city of Wilmington resident, as well as grown up in the city.
Thank you very much, Darren, and thank you to all of you for coming out tonight, which is our second town hall meeting in person. We did have our original town hall meeting here scheduled for Bancroft that was canceled. Some people I know in the audience showed up. We apologize for that. We had an active shooter incident going on terribly that day. But instead, we had a Facebook on Live, and we had, frankly, thousands of people who joined us at one time or the other, and a couple thousand who looked at the tape, so we touched a lot of people that night. I would like to introduce the legislators in the room, the members of the General Assembly, who, as governor, I work with to help make Delaware schools the best they could be. They all represent, as I look around, parts of this district. Senator Sokola is just walking down the aisle, who's the chair of the Senate Education Committee. He's sitting in front of Senator Marshall, who represents the west side of Wilmington. Senator Henry, who is here in the front, who represents more Center City, and this side of Wilmington. We have Representative Jakes, who's the chairman of the House Education Committee, represents a district down by Glasgow High School and up to Newark. We have Representative Oshensky, who's here, represents Greater Newark area. And there was Mike Ramone. How could I forget Representative Ramone, who actually, Paul's hiding behind the person in front of him. Do you have part of Christina? You have part of Christina on the outside of Newark. And then Representative Palmbach, whose district, the 23rd, is Greater Newark, the University of Delaware community. Thank you all for coming out. Mayor Purzycki, thanks for coming. Appreciate your attendance and interest today. Our effort really tonight is to hear from all of you. We've heard a lot of comment. We are engaging in an effort to develop a memorandum of understanding. When I say we, Secretary Bunting, the Department of Education, Darrell Green, who heads up our Division of Innovation and Improvement, which is a new office created intentionally to help school districts and schools raise student achievement and provide our kids with the educational opportunities that they all deserve. So one of the things that we identified early on was the need to lift up the education provided to the kids across the city of Wilmington, not just in the Christina School District. And we just decided to start here and partner with the district to address and improve the educational opportunities provided in the Christina schools, which include Palmer in Southbridge, Bancroft here on the east side, Stubbs, which is further up on the east side on the way to the Brandywine River, Pulaski, which is on the west side, and Hedgeville area, and then up the hill, Bayard, which is the middle school on the west side of Wilmington. So those are the Wilmington schools, elementary and middle schools. Obviously, they feed high schools that are mostly in Newark. You got Glasgow, Newark, and Christiana. Our focus is on those schools here in the city of Wilmington. So we have, I don't know if everybody got a sheet that was handed out. We've got a series of areas that we expect to focus on, giving school principals more control over decision making. These are the things that we'd like to see in this partnership with the Christina School District. I've been talking to Rick Gregg, the new superintendent, from his first day on the job when we were touring Bayard Middle School. That was several months ago, and through the winter and spring up to our efforts recently to develop this memorandum of understanding. I've also met with the school board itself and presented at one of its meetings with Secretary Bunting and Durrell and our team. John Sheehan is my economic or education advisor. I hope is not here tonight because he just got married on Saturday and he's supposed to be on his honeymoon. So there was some rumor that he was going to show up tonight, but I hope he does not show up for his sake. The second key area we believe is in empowering teachers to have more input into how resources are used at the building level, to address student achievement rates, which in the schools that I mentioned are not acceptable, by increasing learning time for students, by creating trauma-informed classrooms that ensure safe, supportive schools. Durrell has already started on that work, training educators, teachers, and principals across the city, not just in the Christina School Districts, on trauma-informed approaches to educating our kids. And then finally, and maybe most importantly, establishing systems that can create sustained change. We're in this for the long haul in terms of initially partnering with Christina School District to focus on the schools in Christina, hopefully to create examples that the other schools in the city can copy and emulate, to try innovations to ultimately raise student achievement so that every child that goes through our school system, wherever it is in the state of Delaware, has an opportunity to graduate from high school ready to go into a job, career ready, or on to college. And we know about 50% don't go on to college, so we got to focus on both cohorts of students. So we look forward to hearing from you, all of you tonight. That's the purpose of this town hall meeting. As I said, we've had one other up at Byard a week or so ago, and we had our Facebook Live. We take the input that we're hearing, try to incorporate it in the discussions that we're having with the district, and develop a memorandum of understanding to operate as we move forward in partnership. So with that, I'd like to introduce our Secretary of Education, Dr. Susan Bunting. She was the longtime superintendent at the, I guess I shouldn't say long time, but in the Indian River School District. I got to know her through that role, first I guess as assistant superintendent and then as superintendent, and nominated her to be our Secretary of Education mainly because of her experience in working with principals and teachers in raising student achievement at the school building level. So Secretary Bunting.
Thank you. And I will start with that academic campaign that we have for all students. A belief, first of all, that all students can learn, and it's our responsibility to figure out how to make them learn, how to help them learn. So we have a strong initiative. We call it our Birth to Third Grade initiative on reading, because we have recognized that if a student doesn't read proficiently by the time he's finishing the third grade, there really is a long-term impact on what's going to happen to that student in school and in life. The third grade reading proficiency seems to be a very accurate indicator of high school graduation and also success later in whatever walk of life that student chooses to follow. So we're organizing with our Office of Early Learning, things that happen at the preschool level. We're also working diligently in our classrooms to make sure that we organize ourselves to enable students to reach greater proficiency in reading by third grade. And so that's one of the things that I'd like to add to our conversation this evening as a major focus for our work in the next year. But we also recognize that students aren't able to learn if they come to school with things that are constantly interfering with their learning. We all know the statistics for some of our students in our areas in Wilmington. We recognize that our students are coming to us with what we call adverse childhood experiences that interfere with their learning. So we'll see a lot of our work this year dedicated to working with teachers with trauma-informed practices. You'll hear us talk about compassionate schools that we're trying to develop and train our teachers. It's a different way of working with our students, trying to take into account what it is that they may be bringing with them for the background that morning or that year in their lives, And so we're working with our staff members to consider different ways of dealing with discipline. That doesn't mean we don't have high expectations for discipline, but we're going to do it with a little more compassion than we once had, understanding what that child might be bringing to school. We want them to feel successful at school. We also want them to feel respected and loved so that we can work with them to maximize each child's potential. And the third thing that I'll mention that you'll hear us talk a lot about this year is something that we are referring to as a dual generation facility. We see that that family influence is very important for our students. And so we envision a dual facility where on one floor, for example, you would have a very strong early childhood program where a child is getting the readiness skills that he or she needs to be successful in kindergarten, both in the math and the language arts areas. And along the way, having all the other experiences that build a child's reservoir and prepare him or her to go to school and be the most successful they can be. We also would have on a second floor an adult array of opportunities that would range from adult literacy, prenatal care, parenting skills, job skills. We're working closely with the Department of Labor to consider some kind of job skill program that would be directly linked with a local employer so that if you finished a certain series of trainings, then you would be given a certificate that would be an actual ticket to a job. So we want to work with the whole family to back up our students and make sure that they're coming to school ready to learn, but also with the support that we feel is necessary in the home, and we want to make sure that that successful outside of school life is going to match up with what we can provide in school. So with that, I will turn this over to Darrell Green to talk a little bit more about what he envisions happening with our Office of Innovation and Improvement.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Darrell Green. I'm the Director of the Office of Innovation and Improvement for the Delaware Department of Education. I have assumed this role as of August 1st. Prior to that, I was Assistant Superintendent in the Brandywine School District for 5 years, where I oversaw the operations. I was also Director of Elementary Ed, overseeing all 9 elementary schools in Brandywine School District, as well as federal Title I programming. And I was also the former principal of Harlan Elementary. Previous to my experience in Brandywine School District, I worked here in Christina. Actually, this is the building where I got my start as a 6th grade teacher. Teaching under Maurice Pritchett and Mr. Peter Vassos, the dynamic duo who many of you who don't know, I'm sure you've heard of the legacy that they've left here at Bancroft. Leaving Bancroft, I actually taught 4th grade at Stubbs. And then after leaving Stubbs, I was at Bayard as an assistant principal and principal. So I have experience in all 3 of the buildings, but as a vast experience in the city as a whole. I lived in Wilmington for a good portion. I'm not a Delawarean, but I like to tell everybody Wilmington chose me. So in my various roles and capacities as a professional, mentor, and just a community advocate for children and families, much of that work over the past 19 years has been centered within the city of Wilmington. So I'm excited about the opportunity that lies ahead of us and really partnering, again, not just with Christina School District, but the city as a whole, still working with Red Clay, so our office still supports the efforts of Highlands Elementary, Warner and Shortledge, and Red Clay, so we're still supporting them as well through what we call Compassionate Connections work, as well as some other instructional leadership development type work that we're supporting them on. And then across the state, we're supporting Woodbridge and Sussex County, just as we're supporting, again, Christina. Actually, we had a symposium today in Brandywine School District around this issue of trauma-informed learning and teaching practices, understanding that over half the children within the state of Delaware come from impoverished communities. So there's a lot of social determinants and factors that play out in the classroom. So it's ultimately my goal, our goal, is to really support the educators, not only in the classroom, but give the leaders in the buildings the opportunity, support, and technical assistance that they may need to ultimately reach and not only support the children, but the families and communities that each school serves. So with that, I guess I'll turn it back over to the governor.
So this is our team. We're working together. We signed a letter of intent to engage in a a series of discussions to develop a memorandum of understanding, which would basically lay out how we're going to do this partnership. Obviously, something that would be approved by the Christina Board of Education. We have some of those members here with us. So we welcome your comments. One other point I'd like to make, since this morning we had a Family Services Cabinet Council meeting. That is a group of cabinet secretaries representing the Department of Children, Youth, and their families, the Department of Health and Social Services, the Department of Education, our Department of Safety and Homeland Security. So all these corrections, all these departments that interact with families in one way or the other. This is a way of making sure that we're all working together as we touch these families in different ways with state agencies and as it affects their children. So this is something that was recommended by the Wilmington Education Improvement Commission and by many people. It was a collaboration that was started by then Governor Carper, and something that we feel is very important to all the work that we're doing, not just here in the city of Wilmington, but across our state. So we would invite anybody. John has and I've been informed that John Sheehan did show up. John, I'm telling you, you're supposed to be on your honeymoon, buddy. That's not a good way to start. Does your wife know you're here? Okay.
So if you have questions, please raise your hand, and I will walk the microphone around.
My name is Jessica Marcus. I was on your online thing. I asked a few questions, so I appreciate you answering for me. I've been a substitute teacher for many years. My daughter, she actually goes to school. So I like to do that because it gives me freedom to go on field trips and all that good stuff. So I really enjoy it. And I've subbed at quite a few schools, almost every school in Newcastle County at this point. So I've kind of seen everything from kindergarten all the way up through high school to see how things work. And I've seen what administrations really do well. When administrations seem to have almost the same kind of things on their plate and aren't doing so great. So there's a lot of different things, and administration can have a really big impact, I think, on things like, I think Shortridge actually does a fantastic job at what they're doing over there. But one of the things I see, especially in some of the rougher schools, I was in a pretty rough school yesterday, an elementary school, which is kind of sad to begin with, to even say an elementary school is rough. It's kind of a sad thing to even say. But I literally, throughout the day, spent time dealing with kids threatening me, cussing at me, third grade, mind you, fighting with each other, doing nothing but this is, in between all of this, I got a little bit of teaching done throughout this whole day. And what I've seen throughout the schools is that they generally break down, each class generally breaks down into three main groups. And I'm sorry for the Star Wars kind of analogy, but you have a few kids between 1 to 4, 1 to 5 kids that are like, I hate to, your dark side kids that constantly are pinching, yelling, getting out of the chairs, that are just, no matter what we do, that I'm constantly having to call administrators to come get. And they just make the classroom a problem. And then you have your Padawans, you have your kids that are pretty good, for the most part, are very good kids, but are easily influenced by your other kids. They're being picked on by them, and then they fight back, and then it turns into a problem. And then you have your Jedis. You have 4 or 5 amazing kids in every classroom that, honestly, when I leave there, I'm in tears because I think these kids don't belong in this classroom with these kids. They're too good to be here. They're too smart. They're respectful. They want to learn, and you see the looks on their faces all day. You see their faces because they're just like they're miserable. They want to learn, and you see that they're so smart. I mean, they finish their work, and you're like, wow, I can't believe how great this is. But yet they're stuck in the classroom. They have to sit there and be like, oh, again. And they sit there and wait for you to call an administrator to deal with the kids that are jumping around and throwing. I couldn't even let them play blocks yesterday when they were done. because they started chucking blocks at each other. And I had to go in the chair because they were chucking blocks at each other. So you can have all the directives and programs if you really, really are interested in doing the largest percentage. Because 75% of your class, I believe, can succeed, exactly, and should be succeeding. We're failing them because we're keeping those 4 or 5 kids in that classroom. We're keeping them in there because I don't know why. We need to be able to separate, to take them out and have a program for them that is designed to saturate them with psychologists, with people that are taking special care of them all day, trying to find out what makes them tick and trying to modify this behavior and start while they're in kindergarten. Because once they get to middle school and high school, their behavior's set. I mean, by the time they get there, it's the middle schools, I won't even substitute middle schools because I've been jacked up against a wall in middle school just for asking a kid to use the dictionary. So we need to take the really smart kids, have some gifted and talented programs, take them, let them see what they can do. Like let them, take them out, let them see what they can do, and let the regular kids in the class have a classroom where they can learn without having to sit there at least a quarter, if not a half of their day with other kids who are beating them up, calling them names, disrupting the classroom and keeping the teacher from being able to do her job. So if you take these kids, you have to realize that you're hurting all the rest of the kids by not doing anything about that small percentage. Because you're not helping anybody, you're not helping them. You send them to an administrator for 20 minutes, they calm down, they take a walk around the school, they come back, and 10 minutes later, they're back at it again. So they need to be in a separate wing where they can have your administrators, your paraprofessionals, you have them that are smaller classes, they can be dealt with. They can get counseling once a week. You can bring their parents in and deal with their parents. This way you identify who they are and you can do something about it while you're letting the other kids learn. I mean, I don't see how it's not rocket science. I mean, you're letting a couple kids infect an entire classroom. It's like a virus, they're infecting everybody, and when they get to high school, it's too late. We have the highest percentage in the entire country, right here in Wilmington, of youth-involved shootings. By the time they get to high school, it's too late. We have to start when they're young and do something about it now.
Does somebody want to take?
I mean,
you want to take a shot?
There was no question in it. I mean, I appreciate you volunteering and subbing in the buildings. I mean, I think it's a little bit more complex than weeding out what we perceive to be the bad apples or the 25% of third graders. I mean, that's what the class that you said you taught. So I would, as a building leader, administrator, as a parent, as an advocate for children, I mean, I think there are some points that you make that we can centralize programming and be more intentional about some of the programming, but I think that also speaks to the trauma work that we're doing. I'm almost afraid to speak now. So, point taken. I mean, again, I think it's layered. And how we address, and I would just use the quote that loved children come to school to learn, and children who aren't loved come to school to be loved. So there has to be a level of compassion in terms of what we do and understand that behavior is a form of communication. So when you have children who are acting out in the manner in which you expressed, they're communicating something to us. So it's up to us as educators, it's up to us as practitioners to figure out what it is that they're communicating and figure out what the appropriate programming, whether that's social emotional learning, which I know a lot of our schools are engaged in. They teach the PATH curriculum. It's really having high expectations for them and not just understanding that we can't just solely focus on behavior. But more importantly, I would also go as far as to say that we have to have culturally relevant curriculum to engage children. You know, too many of our children who come from urban communities, what we're teaching them and how we're trying to reach them, there's no relevance to the content. So it's hard to make that connection about what you're teaching me and ultimately, what does that mean for me once I leave school? You know, is there literature with individuals in there? Are there heroes in those stories that look like me? So there's a lot of things that I think we have to unpack. So yeah, I mean, point taken to what you shared, but I would also say, you know, continue to do what you're doing in terms of going in those schools and supporting, because you could be the one that makes a difference in those children's lives who are coming to throw that block. You know, again, I'll go as far as to say, love children come to school to learn, and children who display those difficulties are probably just looking for a little bit of love. And that's us bringing that compassion and understanding that we have to reach the whole child and get down to the root cause of as to what are they expressing and why are they choosing to display the behaviors that they're displaying when they're in those classrooms. So thank you for your comment.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Johnson, and I'm with National and State PTA, and I've been around a long time, and I have a question, but I just want to say one thing. PTA is not about baking cookies and raising money, although that's what people think. It's about advocacy, and it's about family engagement. It's the bread and butter of PTA. And I've been around a long time when priority schools, turnaround schools before that, whatever it was. It's 25 years of being involved. I've seen a lot of things to try to improve students in Wilmington and the surrounding areas, the students, the most needy students. And so I have two questions that I want to ask. One is about what is the plan and the investment that's going to be made in family engagement? Because we all know that if families are engaged in their children's education, the students do better. And Susan and I have had many conversations about this, so I know that you agree with me. But I just feel like we're always using the same things to engage families. We have to think outside the box. It's not a one-size-fits-all answer. What might work at Shortridge might not work at Pulaski. I just feel that this is an opportunity for the state to really make an investment in family engagement. And we need to recognize that we can't just check a box off, because that's what's been happening, whether it's been through Title I money or however it's paid for. Family engagement needs to be meaningful. And many of the families that we're talking about, they might have more than 2 or 3 jobs, and they might not look at family engagement the way like I was involved or the way you were involved. And so it's important for us to recognize that. So I'd like to know if there's been even a discussion or any kind of an emphasis on this particular subject, because I don't think, unless all the pieces fall into place, that we can be successful with these students. Additionally, I think we lack in giving our staff in our schools family engagement training. And I know that might sound silly, but I think professional development so that teachers and administrators in the schools that we're discussing have some kind of tools, and professional development is the only way to say it, in engaging families. And so I would like to know, that's my first question, of how you're going to invest in that and what your plans are for that, for these particular schools. Oh, no, I'll wait.
I'll start by saying that the family engagement piece is a major part of what we as the Department of Education throughout the state see as an integral part of student success. So we actually have placed on Darrell's team a family engagement specialist, and he can give you the plan for that.
Why, thank you. So one of the things that you just made, you made the point that the families that we're talking about, and I think that's mistake number one, is, you know, too often we talk about families rather than talk to them, and engaging them in a meaningful way and understanding, to your point, you know, it goes beyond the bake sale. And what does meaningful engagement look like? And I think that first starts with understanding who we are serving so that schools can transition to become advocates for families instead of adversaries. And that's not to say that that's the case here, but it also comes to the point that we have to understand who we're serving. If we don't have that understanding, then we traditionally do the things that we've always done. And in my experience, if you get children excited enough about learning, they bring parents. It could be grandma, pop. I mean, I've had a number of grandmothers who come to say, I am tired of coming to this school, but you have my granddaughter excited about this program, you have my grandson excited about this program, or it could be an uncle, it could be an older brother, an older sister. So when we talk about engagement through the family, it's who and how we're engaging them and where we engage them. And sometimes it may not necessarily be in the brick and mortar of the school. It's really looking at where are there our community allies and partners that we can also engage them with too. So one of the things that we are looking at through the work that we're doing currently, and we just actually had a phone conference this morning, is how we actually defining family and the community engagement. Because not every child has an adult who can actually come, whether they're working or they just aren't able to come. But what does that level of engagement look like? What does that look like in the learning opportunities that we're talking about? And then ultimately, what does that look like in social engagement? And really differentiating the difference. Not everyone wants to come for pizza anymore. So, I mean, I think the reality is, we would always say if you feed them, they'll come. Well, you can only eat but so much Pat's Pizza. And it's really looking about the program and understanding that if we're teaching reading programs, most often, sometimes we're actually helping the parent. And we have to simplify it too. I'm an educator, but I can tell you, I argue with my 7-year-old because the way that I'm helping her do her math homework is not the way that her teacher's teaching her in the classroom, and I'm an educator. So, when we think about how we're engaging parents, we have to communicate with them and find and get some insight from them as what's the best level and rate of engagement, and then support the buildings. I mean, teachers have a tough job teaching, administrators have a tough job leading, so where is that support in terms of resource allocation and maybe have someone who's specialized? Because parent engagement is a specialized quality that it actually takes to not only engage them, but maintain that level of engagement over time. Because then, you see a drop-off typically too through the PTA. You'll have families who will get engaged at kindergarten. You'll keep them maybe through first grade, second grade, but by the time they get to third, fourth, and fifth grade, you have a drop-off. I mean, at one point, I was the PTA president and principal of an elementary school as a result of the fact that we didn't have parents who wanted to serve on the board. So it's that notion of how the schools actually become, in many instances, and many of our administrators are, they serve as that role. As parents, many teachers go above and beyond and serve and fill those gaps and those holes. So again, that's a complicated, but that would mean we would have to partner with you, with Delaware PTA and other agencies to really formalize plans that are meaningful and effective, that parents feel that they're benefiting from as opposed to just coming and check the box, as you said.
And we're also, as I said, with the Family Services Cabinet Council, trying to engage the whole family, not so much always in an educational context, but we spent better part of our meeting this morning talking about how we can reorient or how we can get our probation parole officers working with Health and Social Services to provide services that ex-offenders need as they come back to the community. Well, part of that is how do they engage with their children? How do they engage with their families? And so it's a complex question, right? It's not the kind of family engagement that typically we're talking about in the educational context, but if we're not addressing those issues, then that's going to create strife in that household. And we've just got to do it in a more comprehensive way. And we're going to come up with an approach that's going to identify, not just in this district, but across the city, a population of ex-offenders and try to figure out a better way that they can engage with their children.
So we're going to try this microphone again. Raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll bring it back to you. We'll start right here.
Hi, good evening. My name is Whitney Williams. I'm a proud employee of the Christina School District and Parents as Teachers program here for Newcastle County. I'd like to really take just a brief moment to thank our principals here within our city schools. I've worked with many of them and known them for a long time. Been in Christina over 20 years now, and I really just want to thank each of you. I think you all are phenomenal in my view. One of the questions in tailing back on what Yvonne was sharing in reference to the family engagement piece, it is a piece that I hold dear in heart to myself in representing that here for the district as well as for the county. Having visited Dr. Bunting when you were superintendent in Indian River, the blended model there that you had for the early childhood program included home visiting. Also, when Darrell, when you were at Bayard and in Christina, the pieces of what you got in recognizing the importance of going to the home, because you did that. You went to the students' homes. I've seen you do that. Talking with Mr. Gregg, the things that we've talked about in reference to even when you visited families' homes. I represent, along with others here tonight, the pieces for home visiting, and one of the program leaders for home visiting here in our state. Leslie Newman is here. We have representatives here from Children and Family First as well who visit the homes. Would you consider having conversations with our programs, with our program leaders, to include the pieces of a strategy that can include home visits in the family engagement piece that we know is so crucial with getting to the parents and getting to what their needs are? Because we know when we're looking at the whole child, we can't do that in isolation of the parent. So my question is, would you consider that? Would you consider bringing people like myself and others who represent the home visiting programs to the table, because it's what we do every day? So we touch just across one home visiting program. We visited 10,000 times across our state. And within our county, 5,000 to 8,000, visits that we're providing. And so if you would, I don't know whether I'm putting myself or putting our programs out, but when we want to make change, we get it. We're in the homes. We're doing the work there, that where it begins from birth. And so we'd like to partner. And my question is, would you all consider the home visiting programs as a component to include at the table?
The simple answer is yes, absolutely. In fact, some of the dual generation center that we're discussing is right up your alley, so we would not even embark on that without you at the table, so absolutely.
Who was next here? You're next. Thank you.
I'm Herb Brown, affiliated with Hope Street. I just wanted to ask you, first of all, I'm on board with the 5 key areas. I like them. My question is the empowering teachers to have more input on how resources are used. I think that's definitely a plus because they're there every day, day in, day out. I know quite a few kids, at home, their life is a little difficult, and I can say this safely, when they get to school, it's supposed to be like a safe haven to them. I'm thinking that we need a few more after-school programs. We need to give the kids a little more incentive. I'm sorry, I'm bad with names. But when you mentioned, when kids do good, parents show up because they're proud of their kids. And I've been around for a couple minutes, and I remember in school, there was always one kid in the classroom. He wasn't bad, he just wanted some attention. He had some stuff going on that we didn't know, but today I know about it. And I think as long as we put a little energy into finding out what's going on with him at home, he or she will have a better chance. And then closing, I wanted to, it says, creating trauma-informed classrooms that ensure safe, supportive schools. I know a lot of kids, they can't wait to get to school because it's their happy place. All of them ain't A students, B students, but it's their happy place. For whatever the reason, can't wait to get to school because that's all they have. And I think the young lady mentioned, I think at an early age, in elementary, preschool, that's when we got to get the seed in them, because when they get to high school, it's wrap. They have to. When you wake up in the morning, they're so happy to get to school, but if they're not getting what they need, after a while it kind of fades off. And I think we just need to keep them attentive for the reason why they're in school. And I'm just like anybody else in here, I'm gonna say, go out on a limb. When I see somebody else doing good, I think sometimes, like, hey, I want to do that too. Because sometimes the troublemaker, he's not the class clown. No, it's not funny no more. And he'll realize that, and hopefully, I believe in all our kids. I believe all our kids can make it. They just need a little encouragement. They just need a little help. We just have to be a little understanding. And one more question in closing. I was reading here. It says 2018-2019 school year would be implement these 5 areas. I think that would be great. I think that would be great because that's a start. You know, I've been around a minute. I know a lot of things are a process. You know, I got like instant gratification, but I'm understanding today it's a process, and it happens slowly. But as long as we stay together and come together and focus on the solution, we have a better chance. Thank you.
I'd just like to address one part of that. You mentioned after school, and I saw Kevin Kelly was here from the City Parks Department. He must have walked out, but part of our broader initiative to implement the Centers for Disease Control recommendation is to provide safe havens, if you will, for an after-school environments for children. So that's going to be part of our initiative as well. And the way that those work the best if they're coordinated with the schools, so that you can get an opportunity for extra time for those children as they go out. Maybe they're going to go to the Boys or Girls Club or one of the community centers in the area, or you're going to have that after-school program there in the school. So we'll be looking at lots of opportunities to get extra time for the children that need it. And part of that involves partnering with community service organizations that provide after school and, of course, early education programs as well.
Hello, my name is Daphne Evans, and I've been in the youth development, early childhood field for over 30 years, and consider myself an advocate, although I work in the field itself. I've worked with the Delaware Readiness Teams, and I still work with the Delaware Readiness Teams. I volunteer with them now. I used to head them across the state, as well as now work with the Early Childhood Comprehensive Systems Grant. What I would like to see in Wilmington, and I know the principals do try, but more coordination, as Whitney was saying, with early childhood. That's where it starts. They need the support, not only larger centers, not only the Head Starts, but the in-home child cares. And all the independent centers that are out there, they need all the support they can get to work with the same children that are coming to the schools in 5 years, and to reach the children that are not going into child care centers. Because there is a great number of children that none of us see until they're 4 and 5 years old, when we really need to see them at 2 and 3 and even infancy to be able to thwart some of the things that are happening. And I know that home visiting is doing that. I commend them for what they're doing. I've been in a lot of the schools. I commend them for what they're doing. But I think the communication between the schools itself and directly with the early childhood programs could need some work. I know that the Dell teams have sponsored things where we have had both visit one another and start that conversation, because sometimes the expectation is totally different for an early childhood setting going into, them going into kindergarten. It's a whole, miscommunication about what is expected and what is needed. And I think those lines of communication, I see them opening up, but it needs to be one of these key areas on here. Early childhood really needs to be one of the key areas on here, because once you get them at 4, it's not that it's too late, but you've waited way too far when you could have thwarted it when they were infants and toddlers.
Hi, my name is Dawn Alexander, and I live in the city of Wilmington. I'm very proud to live in the city of Wilmington on Lincoln Street. My daughter is a student at PS DuPont, and I taught at Warner Elementary for several years, and I work in Colonial School District. And so the city is very near and dear to me. I worship right down the street on Church Street. So I'm an early childhood person. Here we are all together. And those of us in early childhood feel like what's happening in our city with early childhood is we're spitting in the wind. There's so much more we could be doing, and we're not doing it. So we have to make a more systematic effort to reach every single family in the city of Wilmington between the ages of birth and 5 before they walk in the door at kindergarten. We absolutely have to do that. And certainly we've come a long way with Delaware Stars, but we have a long way to go. I see people here who've worked on readiness teams, and we've worked with families and community agencies with children birth to 8 and also families with teachers in schools, but there is a disconnect. And Daphne talked about the Early Childhood Comprehensive Systems Grant. We're working, those of us in schools and early childhood agencies, we're working with the Department of Public Health to make sure that developmental screening is available for all children, but we need to saturate the community with developmental screening. We need to be going to barbershops, laundromats, every restaurant, every takeout place, up and down Market Street. We need to make sure that developmental screening is available for every single family in the city of Wilmington from the time children are born until they walk through the door in kindergarten, because decades and decades of research show us that if we provide high-quality early intervention for children and early high-quality learning opportunities when children are young, then they are much less likely to need remediation in 3rd grade. So we know if we spend the money early, if we input our energy, our time, our efforts when children are young I mean 6 months old, 9 months old, and we educate moms when they're pregnant, we know if we do that, then when children come to kindergarten, they're not going to need the same kind of support that we're hearing, that the challenge you're having. It's going to happen when they're younger. So I beg you, I urge you, listen to your early childhood people. We know that if we saturate the community with screening and high quality early childhood opportunities, and we educate families, we are in this as a partnership with our parents. We love them, we hug them, we embrace them, and they're our partners in this work. So spread that, keep it going, and whatever we can do to make early childhood efforts on this list a high priority, please do that. Thank you. Oh, one more thing about that. Sorry, governance. So Daphne talked about early learning and the Office of Child Care Licensing, and I work in Colonial, and we're working with Office of Child Care Licensing. We're working with Purchase of Care. We're working with multiple agencies, and in K through 12, the Department of Education oversees the work. But we in the birth to 5 field, we have 3 agencies who oversee our work. And it's really difficult when we're following the regulations of 3 different agencies and trying to teach children every day, help families. So we have got to work on consolidating this governance. It's a challenge.
That's an issue for me, and
That's an
something
issue for you.
that we're aware of, and I'm becoming more aware of it. So we will go to work on that.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen and distinguished panel. My name is Harmon Carey. I'm the founding director of 2 organizations that are involved in African American history, its preservation, and its education. And I've learned a lot from listening to you, to the educational experts here. So I'll try to be brief because I'm kind of not in the box. I'm on the outside, Governor, and I want to get in the box. I went to school on the east side of Wilmington during the days of segregation. I went to elementary school at a school called Number 20. In the 4th grade, I had a teacher named Miss Wright, and she was giving us a spelling test. And one of the words, or 2 words, was Mickey Mouse. Well, I couldn't spell Mickey Mouse, so I looked at my friend in the desk next to me, and I was going to copy off of him. He drew Mickey Mouse. He drew Mickey Mouse. He went on to become one of the most well-known artists in our city. And by this simplistic kind of story, I want to make the strongest case I can, Governor, for our looking at the arts. We have special needs children, no doubt about that. And I'm so happy that you all are taking the bull by the horn and trying to throw him down. But we also have children with special talents. And we have to help identify those talents and help them develop those talents. Now, I know that the school is burdened, your staff is burdened with preparing students for these various exams. And I know because of that, there are things that you would like to do that you cannot do. There are resources that you wish you had, but you do not have. My organization is reaching its hand out to say to you that if you would have us do it, we would like to partner, especially with the Christina schools on the east side, in bringing into the schools activities that are more culturally focused on our history and on our heritage. Now, some of you may think that's a waste of time. I don't. I think that knowledge of one's history, especially when when they are exposed at a young level, can be motivational. So I'm not talking about the icing on the cake. I'm talking about what should be in the cake itself. So please, Governor, give some thought to this. There are activities that we could bring into the school for special sessions and auditoriums and wherever that would expose our young children to information, to activities that could inspire them. Last thing I'll say is this. When your predecessor had public meetings, Governor, he didn't have them in our communities. So I want to commend you for coming to listen to what we have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Harmon, and thank you for your offer.
I would like to just respond to that. The principals who are sitting behind you met with me and Darrell this morning, and the point you just made was one of the critical areas we were talking about bringing back to the schools in the city and featuring arts education as part of those programming ideas that they would like to bring. I will introduce a couple of people who came in after the introductions. Dr. Gina Moody is here. She's the principal of Albert Palmer Elementary School. And Ms. Rashawn Austin is the principal of Pulaski Elementary School. Ms. Austin also is an accomplished dancer. So she has some interest in the arts and in arts education and making arts an integral part of our programming for the city students. And so if you give them your information, we'll bring you into the discussion and how we can make that happen, because we'd absolutely love to partner with you in that effort.
This week I visited Albert Palmer and also visited Bayer. And one of the biggest solutions that the teachers brought to light was art. They felt as though they did not have enough classes to really intrigue the students to follow that path because it's not there. So I'm glad that you brought that issue up, because I will be talking to the team tomorrow about those visits I have at both schools and debriefing them. Thank you.
Hello, my name is D Marquis Hall, and I'm an artist, so it's kind of a good segue that we're speaking about art. I'm an artist and I teach art, and I'm teaching artists, and it's all very new. Just because I made a coloring book, I got hired with Parks and Rec, so Kevin Kelly, he's my boss, and we're doing a lot of great things. I feel like we need to do more cultural things, just like Mr. Carey said, we need to do more African-American inspired and African-American ingrained work, because we're working with mostly young African-American children, and they're going to be able to connect to it when they see people that look like them, and they learn about people that look like them that they never heard about before, other than 1 month out of the year, and it's one person and one speech, but there's so much more history. So the book that I made is called Black Lives Matter, and It includes different leaders from Henry Ossawa Tanner, who's one of the first world-renowned black painters, who's from Philadelphia, but a lot of people don't know about. We're going to actually be doing a program here after school at Bancroft, and you know, we've always done these after-school programs, but it was just athletics. It was just basketball. It was just football. It was just whatever it is that they want to do in the gym. We throw balls at them, and then they just do what they want to do. But we're going to provide more alternatives. And I want to say something. The first lady that stood up, the teacher, she touched me just because when I was young, you know, I didn't have any African-American teachers. That's another problem. We need more black teachers, more black male teachers especially, more black male positive influences in the young people's lives. Her having to get the administrator to take care of the problem, I feel like the teachers, they need to have a little bit of administrator in them. They have to, it's hard with the young people when they don't have respect for themselves, when they're not learning about the people that came before them that will make them respect themselves. You learn about Henry Ossawa Tanner when you learn about Louis Latimer making the light bulb with the carbon filament that we have today, and not just Thomas Edison. There's kids at Thomas Edison School that never heard of Louis Latimer, who actually put the carbon filament in these light bulbs that allowed them to last longer than just a day. But they don't learn that. They don't learn about the people that, genius, you know, Hidden Figures, great movie, buried history. There's so much buried history. So we got to unbury it, we got to unearth it, we have to instill respect in the young people so that they will respect themselves and that they will respect their teachers, so that they'll respect their parents, so that they'll respect their brothers and sisters, so that they'll respect their whole community, their environment. They won't litter, they won't act out, they won't do the crazy things that they might do if they don't have the respect that they should have for themselves. So we're going down to the African American Museum in DC on November 11th, Veterans Day, and I'm excited about that because we're actually leaving from the African American Congressional Medal of Honor statue, which is the only African American Congressional Medal of Honor monument in the whole country. And a lot of people don't know that it's right here in Wilmington, Delaware. And it's been vandalized, and we're working on getting that fixed too. So I'm excited about what it is that we're doing and who it is that is going to be benefiting from it. And I feel like everybody benefits when we do these things for the most vulnerable of us all. I actually was at a thing earlier today at Widener. I don't know if you guys heard about it. Some people might have heard about it. It was about privilege and bias racially, and you know how the police they over police, and they have this racism towards our community, and it affects everything, not just policing and crime, but and the judicial system, but education system too. We have to recognize the problem. We have to recognize what it is, why it is that we're not getting the treatment that we deserve. And I respect that we were here in this community, just like Mr. Carey said. I live right down the street, right on 10th Street, and I respect that there's two African-American gentlemen, educators, black educators that are well respected, established, and experienced on your board. Mr. Morse, I respect you being here. I respect everybody. We got to respect each other. So I just wanted to stand up and say that I'm happy that everybody's here at Bancroft. And I want her to say something because she's working with the special kids. I want to say something. What I wanted to say about you, what you said about the alternatives, I was in special needs classes when I was a kid. I couldn't read when I was young. I didn't get the attention I deserved. When they put me in those classes, I got that one-on-one attention that I needed. I don't badmouth a special need class. I don't badmouth alternative schools. I read Man-Child in the Promised Land. Claude Brown wrote that book, and you know, he was in those alternative schools, but he recognized, he saw, someone told him, if he makes these mistakes when he's older, when he's 18 years old, he's going to have that rap sheet that stays with you forever. So it's important that we give the people, especially the young people, the love that they need, like Mr. Green said, because a lot of people, traumatic things happening at home, they're coming to school, and they need love, you know? So that's it.
Well, you can really help us because you said you're working with Kevin Kelly in the Parks Department, so we need that kind of approach through Kevin's efforts after school. So join the team. Happy to have you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Maria Beauchamp, and I am a resident of the area. I'm also a community advocate and activist. And when I first moved to Wilmington, I came from Puerto Rico. So it was my teachers that taught me how to be a community activist and an advocate. My question goes towards one of your key areas, number 4, creating trauma-informed classrooms that ensure safe, supportive schools. Now, this particular area in which I live in, most of the kids that come to this school have to pass 4, if not sometimes 5 or more drug dealers. Also, they have to walk by a liquor store. So what are we going to do, not just to ensure their classroom setting inside the school, but how they're walking to school? Because a lot of those kids are walking here.
So a lot of the work is centered around helping staff members understand the signs and symptoms of children who are experiencing trauma, so that we don't disproportionately identify or over-identify African-American males for special ed services, because we consider them to have an emotional disability rather they're acting out the community trauma and the chronic stress that they're experiencing as a result of walking through neighborhoods where they have to constantly look over their shoulder because they're fearful of what may happen or because of what they may experience that night. And moving beyond that to teach children how to be resilient. Because unfortunately, you know, schools can't change the total world or total environment, but we can help children understand that your circumstances don't define who you are and that you can overcome as a result of that. And I'm sitting here as a case of that. I mean, I grew up in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area where our nation's capital was Murdertown, USA. And I've lost the count of friends and family members who have died to gun violence and community violence. But it took people at the local recreation center to have safe havens so that our children know that they are protected by the drug dealers, because once they know that you are on a path to success, people in the community respect children who they know who are about something. So we got to help elevate the community, understand that our schools are the epicenter. They're microcosms and reflect the communities which they serve. So while we may not be able to change the street, maybe we can expand that safe haven or that safe zone where children can feel and walk through their neighborhood safely. And more importantly, keep them engaged at a longer period of time to minimize the amount of time that they actually are spending out in this community or in the streets in the neighborhood, whether that's through the rec centers, the Boys and Girls Clubs, or here within the schools. So it's going to take you as an activist, it's going to take us to actually get with families, it's going to take a community effort, because the longer we continue to just see this issue as an educational or a school issue, we're going to be 10 years removed, 15 years removed, 20 years removed, and understand why this problem hasn't been fixed. And it is a part of what you indicated with regards to early learning. So the earlier we teach children how to be resilient, to understand that cursing at a young age isn't cute, you know, the better off we'll be, you know, and reinforcing that behavior. So we have to reconcile with a lot of things when we talk about how we're going to help schools turn around and educate children. But if we, as Brother Montiel said back there, brother, I got you. My children love your books too, by the way. Until we actually reconcile as a community and see this as a community effort and everybody plays their part in this process, you know, we're going to continue to point fingers and blame one another for the failures that's ultimately a community failure. So a very valid point that everyone has made thus far, but it is going to take a holistic approach to us to reach them. But the initial work around this trauma work is helping teachers first and foremost understand the signs and symptoms of children coming to school and experiencing what that chronic stress and chronic trauma actually looks like and how it manifests itself through behavior and through communication. It's just not that I'm coming to school to be bad because I want to be bad. That's not in a child's nature. I mean, it's something that is actually triggering that. And how can we be better aware of it, but more importantly, how can we program and support them to not just be aware, but that we can develop resilient children with high expectations who are going to be able to achieve at high levels and do great things.
With respect to the safe neighborhoods piece of your question, the mayor was here a few minutes ago, but he had to leave. We're working on that as well. There was a big article in the paper a couple weeks ago about the community policing initiative, particularly in West Center City. If you haven't seen it, all you need to do is drive down Washington Street, stop at 7th and Washington. You can see the kind of activity that they're doing. They're changing the way they approach the community. They're out of their cars, walking around, talking to folks. It's going to take a long time to do that, and they're going to go kind of neighborhood to neighborhood. We're working together with them on that initiative. That's not part of this memorandum of understanding, but certainly a critical part of what we need to do here in the city.
Good evening. My name is Kyle Shepard. I'm actually a Newcastle County, Newcastle resident. I'm now at Delaware State University graduate student. My question, or before I get to my question, my issue is, like a lot of people touched on, the demographics that we're serving, those parents, those teachers, and those students from those areas. We see that when it comes time for this discussion to take place, they're not there. So it's good to have people within policy, within government, with educators as well in places like this. But I definitely think, as some people stated, we need a lot more on family engagement, not only just family engagement, but also community engagement. So my question is, as a student and as a graduate student at Delaware State University, how can and what type of level of transparency can you all as a board provide for our top research, policy-led programs like University of Delaware, like Delaware State University, when I'm not the only individual, obviously, who has passion for our youth and for our kids of the state, and there's programs in place where there are young scholars just like myself who are just as passionate, whether they're from Delaware or not, but we need to be able to know that things like this exist, and we need to be able to have a pipeline from the institutions that we want to send our kids to and the issues within the school systems that we're having right now. So, at a younger age, at a younger mindset, I initially thought that, well, the people who want to do something, want to make the change, they're down here. And then the people who have done it, are up here. And there's like this big gap, when that's not necessarily the case, where there are generations in between of people who can make that change. So if we have these middle school levels and these high school levels, how are we incorporating the educators and our future educators who are willing to make changes, and also our students at our universities? How do we create that pipeline of involvement to get more people who look like me out to events like this? And how do you call on us to get that job done? And something that's a little bit more consistent and that I don't have to read about through Delaware Online, or, it's more in my face, where it's like a necessary call to action.
So your comment's right on point, and our challenge, my challenge as governor, is to engage with University of Delaware, Delaware State University, and Wilmington University in particular, to get the resources to create systems. You mentioned the pipeline. We certainly do need a pipeline, and we need courses at each of those institutions that deal with urban education and the kinds of issues that the teachers run into in the environments here in the city of Wilmington, and frankly, in communities across our state. Ed Friel is sitting in the back row there, and his group at the University of Delaware has been working closely with school districts across our state. We can benefit from that. I need to talk to the new president of the University of Delaware. I've already talked to Tony Allen, who's the new provost at Delaware State University. We've had conversations with Wilmington University in terms of the internships that they provide teachers. But your point is a really good one. We need a pipeline, and we need a pipeline of teachers who are prepared to teach in the environments that we're talking about, with the skills necessary to deal with these particular issues. And so that part of that is kind of at my level in engaging with the presidents of those institutions, and I know Darrell and Secretary Bunting are working on it as well.
And there are a number, and I'll get your information before you leave, because we do a monthly Men of Color breakfast that we even re-engage, and it's not just educational leaders, it's business leaders within the community who are entrepreneurs, so that we can actually help our children learn that there's more to a path to life than just hooping, playing basketball. It's that proverbial mindset that, that self-fulfilling prophecy that a lot of our young men think that that's the only avenue. And how do we get people who they see maybe that barbershop owner and get mentoring back in schools, because mentoring is critical. And not just those who come suited and booted every day, who have on a suit, but those who our children see in the community who are viable businessmen, who are entrepreneurs, who have their ear, such as the gentleman with the Hope Street shirt on, who's advocating, who's supporting children, So there's that opportunity to engage at that level. And then ultimately it comes through just advocacy, the fact that you decided to go into education. We have to make education look attractive to children. Because I knew a lot of children who said, why would I want to be a teacher? Mr. Green, why would I want to do what you do? You look like you stressed out every day. Why would I want to do that? So it's really getting that fulfillment to understand that education is a viable field. When we do have students of color who achieve at a high level in high school, we tend to steer them into other fields that they deem to be more lucrative and that's going to provide them with a higher level of income and living, and they don't see teaching. They see teaching as something that I can fall back on. We have a lot of educators that say that, oh, well, my first career didn't work out, so I decided to teach. Well, we need to bring back some efficacy, and I think that's one of the things that we're looking to do with point number 2 when we're talking about empowering educators. And I think our leaders can say the same thing. It's hard to get a pipeline of teacher leaders who want to go into administration, because of how they view the profession. So I think holistically, we got to bring some efficacy back to the profession. So bless you for wanting to get into education. I'm sure you did it because you have a passion and want to make a difference. But we also have to get others who may not have chosen to go into education to understand that they too can still make a difference in the lives of children. Again, whether that's through mentoring or supporting schools through programs. I see Chandra Pitt, who's over there, One Village Alliance, where they do lots of wonderful work within the community to empower our young people to value education and get involved with programs in there. So there's a number of opportunities, but I'll get your information before you leave and plug you in.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer O'Neill, and I'm the secretary of the Delaware Association of School Librarians. And I just first want to say that sitting here, it's been really exciting listening to a lot of the plans and ideas that are circulating, because school libraries, and especially school librarians, can support all of them. We can play an integral role in helping them to be successful. Dr. Bunting mentioned the multi-generational center and the parent education programs. Various audience members mentioned after-school activities, the family engagement piece, the cultural arts part of it, and Mr. Green mentioned the creating a diverse curriculum. We were trained to, select print and non-print materials that could support that. So it's just really exciting, because I think everyone knows that school librarians are proven to be essential in student success, which is detailed in the Delaware School Libraries Master Plan, and a plethora of national research. So my question is that since authorization and funding for school libraries are available through ESSA, how does this partnership plan to implement and strengthen school libraries and certified school librarians in these affected schools?
That's a part of the plan overall, but many of those decisions are made at the district level. And of course, you've been through this challenge for a while, that a librarian is a unit. So principals have to make decisions as to how they use the units that they earn through their student count. So I would encourage you to be a part of the local ESSA plans as they work through what happens locally, knowing that that is something that would be very much a part of the essence of the ESSA plan. And as each district works through, I've had other instances where I've encouraged parents and community members to actually be a part of carving out that local plan. And remember, if teachers have more say in how resources are used, then you also could have an impact on supplying what that library might need.
Good evening. My name is Desiree Faison. I'm actually a community member. I just want to say I have a comment not necessarily a question, but the weight is heavy. In the schools, the weight is very heavy. So I feel like as a state and as a city, we're very concentrated in our connection and our community connection with everything that's going on can be a little bit more improved, and I think we can do better. So the plan is to make a plan. We have families who are very engaged in all of our city schools, and I feel like it's some way that you guys can kind of come in, talk to the families, because if we're engaging families or we're not engaging families in the right way, we need to make sure we make that concentrated connection and make sure that our families understand what's going on in the city schools. They know the data, they know the numbers, and that they can make improvements, because some of our families definitely want to make sure it's improved. Definitely the trauma, definitely the academics, and definitely being on the side with the teachers, principals, and the schools. So that's my comment. So we need to make a concentrated effort in making a plan, a concentrated plan, in dealing with our families who are engaged. And definitely me coming to this meeting was a surprise to me, because I didn't know about the meeting. So we have to make sure that maybe you can come out to our schools and talk to our families when we have family engagement nights, come to our teachers and talk to them for their faculty meetings and let them know what's going on, because we're not reaching the people that we need to definitely make sure that we hear more of their input. And that's my comment.
Well, just to follow up on that, after tonight's town hall, I'm going to be going into each of the schools and having listening sessions. Those listening sessions are already scheduled. One of them is tomorrow, prior to the principal's dinner with his family. So I'll be there at 6 o'clock talking to families, asking what they're looking for in the schools and how we can better serve the needs of the students. So I have listening sessions scheduled already for Stubbs, Palmer, Pulaski, Bayard. And I know that Mr. Tyson has already been in 2 of the schools meeting with faculties to garner their feedback as well.
So you're doing it through creative, through their family nights, right? Creatively, instead of having families come back out on another night for a meeting.
Yeah, the best way for us to do that is connect with something that's already there. So
Exactly.
we already have parents
Okay,
that are
great.
coming. So tomorrow night
awesome.
is a, you're serving me dinner too? Yeah, I'll be eating there as well. So at Stubbs tomorrow night at 6 o'clock.
So I have two more questions, one here and a couple up here. We're going to run out of time. I just want to remind everybody that we have a survey sheet out front at the desk, so feel free, if you don't get to ask a question, to fill out the survey, because we're running right up against the time here. But I'm going to take a question here and then a couple up here in the aisle, and we'll wrap up.
Thank you. Good evening. I am Councilwoman Yolanda McCoy, 6th District. The reason why I'm actually here is not just because I live in the Christina School District, but I just need to let you know about, I am a parent who had to work with the Christina School District. Now, I have 2 children, 22 and 9. My 9-year-old is not in the Christina School District. So you need to get that information, because as I work with Christina, and the schools are very close by, there's something I'm very happy to hear, that you'll be doing training for your faculty, the teachers. Not so much that trauma or anything is something that my children needed, but just to be able to, for the teachers that recognize things that are going on with the child or with the parent, because the teachers are the connection. So my thing was, as my child has issues when it comes to mathematics, and I ask questions for the teacher, well, what am I doing wrong? Does he need after-school care? Does he need tutoring? The answer that were coming back to me is, I don't know what to tell you. So rather than stand in line to see the guidance counselor, because of the fact that I was already community outreach, community organizers, I was already in the mix and I knew who to contact. But that was just my fate. For the other women out there or parents out there who weren't already in the know, who knew those connectors, what happens to those children? How do they fall through the cracks? How do they not know about the supplemental educational services and the monies that are there for Title I and things of that nature? Like, that's what the teachers still need to know, not just administration, but the teachers may need to be informed about whatever services that are available, so that the parent can know, oh, there's still hope. The teachers are the first contact to those parents, not really the principal or the guidance counselor. the teacher. And I just hope that the teachers will have that same information that the office has, that the school district has. That's it.
We have two more right here in the aisles. I'm going. There you go, ma'am.
Good evening. I am Mary Jean Pulaski. I'm a retired member of the Christina School District. With only 1 year to get everything organized and implemented, with all the input that you have collected, what is the timeline to get a committee and a strategic plan? And who and how would the committee be selected?
Well, we've already begun to work on soliciting names for people who are interested in the strategic planning committees. I'm working with the Board of Education on the timeline. Our intent is to have the strategic plan committees in place and presented to the board in January of 2018 for the strategic plan. The board has already decided or given the indication that we are going to be using the same goals that was in the previous strategic plan that ended in July that weren't realized. So we're going to start with those goals as a starting point, and then the committees will be working on there. So that's the strategic plan for the district. Around this particular area of concern, that's one of the areas that the strategic plan will be addressing. But there are other areas that the strategic plan has to take on. Our goal here is to have an MOU completed by December, presented to the Board of Education for approval, because none of this happens for us unless it's approved by the Board of Education. That was part of the agreement before we went into any of this letter of intent. And then once the board agrees to what the framework is for what that will look like, then we've been meeting 2 or 3 times a week already to formulate ideas, to think out of the box, to come up with brainstorming ideas. We have some ideas, but it's premature for me to present those tonight because I wouldn't present anything until I have an opportunity to talk to the members of my Board of Education in a public forum. So the idea is to have these things ready and put in place for September of 2018. And I met with Secretary Bunting today to talk about the need for timelines and roadblocks to make these things happen to be softened so that we can move forward as urgently as we see the need.
So I have a different board than Rick Gregg does. Mine's a little bit bigger. There are a number of them that I introduced earlier tonight are here. Most importantly, including the chairs of the House Education Committee, Representative Jakes, and the chair of the Senate Education Committee, Senator Sokola. We've been having meetings and discussions about this issue, not just with Christina School District, but across the city and across the state. And their expectation is that we have an MOU, or we have a proposal by December, as Rick said. And so that if there are if there's a need for legislation, which there may be, or appropriations, that we'll be prepared to do that as we start out in January. With respect to the strategic plan, the educators are going to work on those pieces. We're going to try to be innovative and look at what works. And I think that Secretary Bunting, as I said at the outset, one of her strengths is that she knows how to raise student achievement at the building level, how to work with principals and teachers. We see our activity in this partnership as a force multiplier, where we can bring some resources, some of which we've talked about tonight, that we can engage higher education with respect to pipelines and so forth. We've got the activities of the Family Services Cabinet Council and those agencies to address and engage families. So we're making progress on that. It's a lot of work, but I'm encouraged in each meeting that we have with the tenor of the meeting, the seriousness of everybody involved, and I'm pretty confident that everybody has the same goal in mind, which is to make sure that we provide the best educational opportunities for our children.
Good evening. My name is Onesimus Alameen. I'm currently a graduate student at the University of Delaware. I want to first thank you all for coming and having this forum. I've heard so many comments today. I want to thank Mr. Green because he brought up some very important topics, which I hope you all are going to include in your MOU, which was the cultural relevance of the education, because the children aren't seeing themselves as heroes, as he stated, which I think is important if we want to decrease dropout rates and things of that nature. Secondly, I want to ask you all, how do you, to include in this MOU something called restorative justice, because I think that's going to be important going forward if we're able to, if we want to actually have a positive impact on the children who are attending these schools. Thank you very much.
So I mentioned the work that we're talking about doing with probation parole. I think it addresses the last piece with respect to restorative justice, if I understood what your point was there, and we hope to make some progress on that as well.
And part of that is through the trauma work. So when we talk about compassionate connections, it looks at it through a number of lenses. First is just the awareness of what trauma is. When we talk about being resilient, it also lends itself in terms of how we employ discipline practices, especially when we know in terms of that's what you're saying. So the notion of restorative justice is when we build that community and you do damage to that community as a child who might throw a block at a teacher. Not that it's a 20-minute walk, but how do we actually process that disciplinary infraction with you in a compassionate way so that you come back and you're welcome back in that community, but you have to restore the harm that you've done. We actually just had a training today around mindfulness and the power of being mindful and how children can learn something as simple as deep breathing to self-regulate. So a lot of that has to do with what you're talking about around restorative justice, and that work is taking place, and I think that's statewide. So we had a number of districts, a number of schools today at Mount Pleasant Elementary School in Brandywine who participated in the symposium, and it dealt with everything around trauma, restorative practices, and mindfulness. So it is a comprehensive approach that obviously we can't delineate through 5 bullet items, but that is a part of the work that we're discussing around the trauma-informed practices.
Sorry to those that I missed in the room. Just a reminder that there's a survey sheet outside. It also has an email address on the sheet that you can send ideas to as well. And so stop at the table before you leave and fill that out. And I'll turn it back over to the governor and Superintendent Gregg for closing remarks.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for coming again tonight, particularly my board, which are the members of the General Assembly. We had a great turnout from out in the county, here in the city as well. We appreciate your attention to this issue and your engagement, and we look forward to having a memorandum of understanding by December that we can discuss as you go back into session in January. I get more encouraged, frankly, with every meeting we have. I really do. With the level of the conversation that goes back and forth, I still believe strongly that we can, with this partnership, through a memorandum of understanding, we can do a lot better. And I'm more optimistic with each discussion we have. I want to thank everybody in the room for coming out. We have a lot of hard work to do. We have a lot of people in this room and folks that aren't in this room who are going to do that work, and I want to thank you for your engagement and thank you for the opportunity to partner.
The governor mentioned optimism, and I believe that we in Christina are optimistic and hopeful that we can actually make a change and make a significant impact for the children that we serve in the city. There are children, there are schools, and we're committed to those schools. I do want to mention Mr. George Evans is here this evening also. He's the president of our Board of Education. Please welcome him. We know this is ambitious. We're not going into this blindly, and we're willing to roll up our sleeves and do the work. And I've got a great team of principals and building leaders over here who are thinking constantly about how we can better serve these students in the city. Mr. Carey?
60 seconds, I promise. I won't be any longer than that. I want to underscore the point that I did not make my fellow here. I appreciate the invitation to talk here.
I do appreciate that. but it's not going to go anywhere unless it becomes a part of the structure that you all approve. Otherwise, it's just Harmon Carey blowing in the wind. There needs to be, in the structure, more collaboration between the schools and community organizations like mine, like Sandra Pitts, like others, or this thing is not going to get anywhere. 3 years ago, on my own, we went to the schools, and it didn't get anywhere. So someone has to say, this is something we should do, and then it'll be done. Someone near the top, like you, Governor.
Thank you, Harmon. Good night.
This is something we should do.